one country that has taken the lead there is El Salvador, and you mentioned President Bukele, and I think it was just such an amazing feat when you had a president of a country choose Bitcoin, money that he can't control, the government can't control, as legal tender. And I really want to applaud what you and Stacy have done there. You guys moved there, and you've been working, boots on the ground, to try to push Bitcoin's adoption there. I guess that's kind of my first question for you. Max, you've been here since a dollar. Um, I can assume that maybe you don't need to do this for financial reasons, but you and Stacy are in El Salvador pushing adoption. Why was it so important for you to go there, and why did you want to be a part of the movement where to help them kind of adopt Bitcoin?
Well, it was always going to be the case that like a country would make Bitcoin legal tender. I remember we had Tour de Meester on Keiser Report 5 or 6 years ago, and we were debating, what country would be the first to make Bitcoin legal tender. And Tour said, well, it's going to be a small country. It's going to be a country looking to escape maybe the dollar hegemony, etc. But El Salvador was not one of the countries we guessed. But the idea is that definitely at some point a country would make Bitcoin legal tender. So El Salvador was that country. And so Max and Stacey went there and we met with the president. And it was obvious that he was completely orange pilled and understood Bitcoin at the deepest level. And so this would be the Bitcoin citadel. This would be a country now is going to be recreated from scratch, because remember, El Salvador had been through 50 years of hell, civil war, and then the gang wars, and the country's being rebuilt really from scratch, and it would be built on Bitcoin as legal tender. So that was couldn't imagine a more exciting project to be a part of. So we moved there, and we've been able to offer our thoughts on some stuff, and make great friends there. And the attitude there is just fantastic. The attitude in El Salvador, because of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is known by 100% of the population. Doesn't you don't actually need to use Bitcoin to be orange pilled, because the mindset of Bitcoin is already you're making a change in your life. And then you have 5, 10, 15, 20% of the population actually using it, and the adoption rate is increasing, etc. But the mindset is 100% part of the daily life. And the optimism that comes with having unconfiscatable wealth that you can aspire to make better in your life, to accumulate property, to have property, unconfiscatable property for you and your family. It has a tremendous impact, and you can feel it wherever you travel throughout the country. There's just an optimism there, and which you don't really have elsewhere. I mean, in the U.S., I think by contrast, the mood seems to be a bit down, a bit of a downer. People are less optimistic, because there just seems to be very not much of a focus on what the country should be doing right now. It seems a bit lost. But you don't find that in El Salvador. El Salvador is very focused, and people are just in a great place.
Yeah.
And this is just permeates throughout life there.
Hmm. It's been like 2 years since El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender. When they first did it, the IMF came out and they said, this is really irresponsible. They were worried that this would bring El Salvador down. The bonds started to trade lower into distressed territory. You recently called the IMF the original shitcoin, which I think is amazing. And I've looked into the IMF a lot, and one of the worst loans that they've made was to El Salvador during their civil war in the 80s, where they basically just picked a side that they wanted to win, gave them the money, and then all the money was used to fund for weapons, not to build any kind of productive endeavors for the economy. It was just kind of wasted in the war efforts. And so they got straddled with all this debt. And here's the IMF saying, "Hey, don't adopt this perfect money. We're worried about your situation." But fast forward to today, and what would you say to the IMF? Because it seems like El Salvador has only grown stronger since they adopted Bitcoin.
No, that's accurate. That's true. I mean, the IMF is a central bank, so central banks don't like decentralized money. So I think that's the whole story.
Yeah.
And they don't like the idea that a country could adopt Bitcoin and decentralize itself away from the global banking cartel and away from centralized banks and everything that comes with the centralized banks. Certainly in Central America, if you read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, this has been the countries where America has sent the economic hitman to topple governments and to start coups. There's been like 50
Mhm.
coups, many of them
Yeah.
sponsored by the U.S. in this area over the years. And the U.S. has always treated Central America as quote unquote their backyard. They don't really see it as independent. They think it's somehow an appendage to the U.S. in some way that they have just total control over. If you look at the history of, let's say, the Ford Motor Company or other corporations, and certainly um, what became Chiquita bananas, originally not U.S. fruit, but I'll think of the name in a second. But anyway, the banana cartel was, of course, exploiting the Central American countries in a quite damaging way for years and years. And this is hard to break up. Right, the IMF would prefer that it had a client state and an easy mark to sell their dodgy loans to, but Bitcoin is rewriting the history books and with decentralized money and obviating the need for central banks. I mean, central banks, as I was saying before, they're coming to the end of a 300-year period, a cycle. There's no point in having a central bank, and so now that I think they're going to become extinct, and the region is not benefiting greatly from El Salvador taking on Bitcoin, and so the IMF is just becoming irrelevant, really.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think that El Salvador is proving to be a great case study for other countries to look at. I mean, when you look at things, I saw you tweet something about how, in terms of Central America and the Caribbean, it has the fastest growth rate in terms of the fintech industry there, like up 25%, and El Salvador is leading the way. And
Hmm.
so you guys, Stacy and you and actually Jimmy Song, helped kind of develop a course for the locals there to help them teach him how to develop on the Bitcoin protocol. And you guys just had your first graduating class, I believe. So can you talk a little bit about that program and why you guys decided to start that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was about a year ago or so. Jimmy Song came to El Salvador to teach a class in his book, Programming Bitcoin.
Mhm.
And this was really, Stacy identified the need to educate local developers and programmers in El Salvador because to kind of grow your own homegrown talent. And so this little pilot program with Jimmy went really, really well. And so the idea was, well, maybe we should just canvass the entire country. So Stacy organized what became now Kubo Plus, which is the country had these cubos already in place. They are local community centers. So Kubo Plus is built on this concept, and
Mm.
to reach out to everyone in the country to try and find the best and the brightest in the country, work with universities, find really talented people, and bring them into like almost a Top Gun school. So for 3 weeks, really, the best and the brightest came to San Salvador and El Zonte, the beach community, Bitcoin Beach. And the best professors, the Bitcoin professors in the world were brought together. The best students were brought together. And at the final kind of leg of this Top Gun school, you had 21 of these excellent students came together and finished the course, and they are now getting jobs. They're getting these high paying, high level jobs that you get if you're a Bitcoin developer, which is a global industry. It's a global. You have global demand for this type of talent. And so now this is at the end of this, really the first semester, the first season, if you will, of Cubo Plus, and the graduating class has opportunities. They're getting jobs, and of course now the next season, the next school year, if you will be, of course, much bigger, because the word has gone out that this is really a
Mhm.
way to enter into the upper echelons in the high income world, is through Kubo Plus and through Bitcoin development. And so it's been a really fantastic success. Stacy and a crew of filmmakers from Hollywood were in El Salvador making a documentary about
Oh,
this.
cool.
So, and this documentary will, I think, drop in the next week or so.
Oh, nice.
And it really tracks. It's a brilliant documentary. Filmmakers we've known for a long time, who are excellent filmmakers, and so they came in, and Stacy directed this documentary, which is covering Kubo Plus. So you'll see really the students and what's going on with the students, and great shots of the country itself. And because El Salvador has not really been featured in many films or TV over the years. There's only one film that was made in the 1950s, I believe, that had El Salvador in the film. But it's just a really gorgeous country everywhere you look. The scenery is fantastic, and that's part of this great documentary is just seeing this country, what it looks like. It's really gorgeous. So that's the Kubo Plus. So that's part of what Max and Stacy do in El Salvador. We try to figure out ways to make Bitcoin country. Make it, get the education, get the visitors, help people here, help people there. That's what we've been doing.